Hi, everyone. We are going to get started here in just a couple of minutes. We'll wait for everyone to get into the webinar, and then we will start here at the top of the hour. All right. Hello, everyone. We are going to get started. So thank you for joining us today. I'm excited to present Simplify Professional Licensing for Architecture, Engineering, and Construction Firms today because so many firms across the United States face a fundamental issue, how to comply with the various licensing, business entity, and ownership requirements across the country. Perhaps your firm is facing difficulties maintaining and renewing licenses and managing qualifying engineers. Maybe you're looking to operate, hire, or employ people in other states, and perhaps you feel like you're reacting and responding, not leading your firms through these events. It is reaching even greater importance as new business opportunities arise and firms need to be in good standing to pursue new business. We're here to tell you you're not alone and to share our expertise in maintaining multi-state compliance. Before we get started, two brief housekeeping items. First, we have a relatively large number of attendees on the call today. For that reason, the audience will be muted. Second, a reminder that today's presentation is eligible for continuing education credits through Earmark. So I'll go over how to get your CE credit at the end of the presentation. My name is Billy Ditchy. I am the sales manager here at Harbor Compliance. I've been with the company almost 4 years now, and my experience spans AEC industry specific licensing as well as general corporate compliance topics for unregulated industries. I spend most of my time teaching AEC firms how to more effectively and efficiently manage multi state regulatory requirements. And on your screen, you'll see my contact information. I do encourage you to take this information down. And if you think of a question after the call, whether that's today, tomorrow, or in the future, please email me and I will work to get you a response. I will also show this slide at the end of the webinar. And a little bit about Harbor Compliance. We are experts in the architectural, engineering, and contracting licensing space. Since 2012, we have helped over 40,000 clients simplify navigating regulatory requirements. And in the AEC industry alone, we have helped over 8,700 AEC firms apply for, secure, and maintain licensing, business lifecycle, and tax requirements for them. Now, more about us later. For now, we have a lot to cover, so let's dive in. First, on today's agenda, we're going to discuss the benefits of compliance and why it should be a priority for your organization. Then we'll examine the top 5 licensing challenges specific to architecture, engineering, and construction firms. We'll also discuss the value of having a comprehensive compliance management solution and how one can allow firms to breeze through regulations, avoid potential issues, and mitigate risk. And then finally, we'll cover strategies for meeting regulatory requirements in each jurisdiction where your firm is operating. Professionals in the AEC industry understand the importance of maintaining up-to-date licenses and registrations. If you're an architect or an engineer, you've likely been managing your own licenses since you graduated college. So the AEC industry has a appreciation of how important licensing is. But have you considered the ways in which a well-run licensing and business compliance function can be an asset for your firm? Being able to secure new licenses quickly enables you to capture growth opportunities in other jurisdictions or disciplines. It ensures the firm can pursue new business, meet their timelines, and gain an edge over competitors that haven't been as proactive. A comprehensive compliance program includes the following. It provides confidence and peace of mind that your organization is fully compliant. It maintains your licenses without any lapse or gaps, reduces legal, financial, and operational risk, safeguards for your firm's reputation. Staying in good standing upholds professional standards of architects, engineers, and contractors. It gives visibility and clarification of the compliance status for each registration and license for your organization. It operates efficiently and involves all compliance stakeholders, saving you time and money. And then it ensures continuity of compliance through business changes and staff turnover. A proactive approach means firms can take advantage of these benefits. We'll talk today about how to create a program that enables you to achieve them. These are 5 licensing challenges that AEC firms face. We'll cover in depth in the coming slides, beginning with navigating the complex licensing requirements to secure professional licenses, both for the individual professional and the firm. We'll discuss the importance of managing license qualifiers, otherwise known as the qualifying engineers or responsible parties, and their continuing education requirements. Then we'll discuss how licensing becomes more complex as you expand into more states. There are considerations around the business entity's name, structure, and ownership, which are closely intertwined with licensing requirements, particularly the qualifying engineer in the new state. And then we'll discuss the requirements for licensing renewals, including the need to maintain good standing and how to stay abreast of those regulatory changes. This is a high-level view of the first challenge we'll cover, which is managing the process of applying for professional licensure. There are, in fact, over 800 state and local requirements, licensing requirements across the United States. Firms need a system to research and fully understand the varying requirements for each license type in each state and local jurisdiction. Each may have business and licensing regulations with certain prerequisites involving firm licenses, individual qualifiers licenses, and entity registration. It's important to understand the order in which license applications and supporting documents must be submitted. Along with the license application itself, there is other documentation needed, like keeping up with continuing education, surety bonds, insurance requirements, and financial statements. As you can see to the right, there is a long list of documents to track and report to the licensing agencies, along with the application form and fees. Licensing authorities commonly require proof of Secretary of State and even Department of Revenue good standing during the initial and the renewal application process. Many licensing jurisdictions stipulate that the business maintains internal records and follows certain governance or ownership requirements. These may or may not need to be reported on a license application, but most licensing agencies have the authority to enforce and penalize governance violations. Firms need to fully understand the order of entity structure, naming, and ownership requirements before attempting to register or pursue licensure in a new state. Why? Because the order of operations between state agencies varies. In some states, like New York, an engineering firm actually has to begin the process of licensure with the state education department before it registers the entity with the Department of State. But in others, like South Carolina, the entity registration happens before the firm applies for its license. And in most states, at least one individual, once again known as the qualifier, must first have their individual professional license. Which brings us to our second challenge, managing qualifiers. As you probably know, a qualifier is the licensed individual designated on your firm's license as being responsible for the firm's work in that state. In most states, at least one individual known as a qualifier or responsible party must first have their individual professional license before the firm can apply for their license. Without a license qualifier in most states, the firm's license application will be denied and they will not be eligible to do business in that state. Managing qualifiers is critical for businesses, as the licensure of these individuals directly impacts the overall standing of the firm. For that reason, you might come across a synonymous term, the responsible party. Professional engineers and architects are the foundation of certificates of authorization. It is vital to maintain them and track their CEUs in order to protect your firm's stability, reputation, and the right to practice. 13 states have determined that an engineer and responsible charge must be a full-time employee of the firm, defined as 60% of working hours in Virginia, 30 hours per week in Ohio and Tennessee, and a majority of working hours in North Carolina, Oklahoma, and Wisconsin. Indicative of their importance is this quote from Illinois that the design firm will become inoperable for all professions if the license of even one managing agent becomes inactive or not renewed. Since nearly every licensing board asks about legal action occurring in other states, the damage could spread across all your business and range from financial to reputational and everything in between. So let's discuss best practices for managing these qualifiers, as the licensure of these individuals directly impacts the overall standing of the firm. In most states, without a license qualifier, the firm's initial license application will be denied. Also, any change in the qualifier's information or a change in the qualifier altogether must be reported within a short period of time, usually within 30 days, sometimes actually within a few as 10. Now, we know that the changes in qualifiers can happen for innocuous reasons, such as an individual just moving home address. They can also happen for more significant reasons, such as that individual departing the firm through retirement, resignation, or winning the lottery. Whether these changes are sudden or expected, firm management needs to be ready to update state licensing boards right away. If an existing qualifier leaves and no one holds the proper state license, someone is going to have to sit for the exam. And if the firm does not report the change, states can and do assess severe penalties for operating without a designated qualifier up to denial of the firm's right to practice. This is why managing qualifiers is mission critical for the firm, and this is what you can do to meet those challenges proactively. The first is just knowing which qualifiers will be designated. Next, ask your team, do you know who your firm's qualifiers are currently? Which states and entities are they acting in that capacity? If that person leaves the firm tomorrow, who could fill that role within just a few weeks or even days? Answering those questions will identify any gaps you need to address. Lapsed licenses may incur penalties to reinstate, but it's better to tackle these types of issues head on. Once your licenses are in order, work to identify individuals who could step in as a replacement qualifier. Firms should work towards having a contingency plan, especially in those key jurisdictions. And you must consider the state processing time. You'll recall that licensure involves multiple agencies. Many licensing boards have only a handful of staff or meet on irregular basis, such as monthly. Expediting an application simply may not be possible regardless of who handles their submission. The state of New York, for example, can take upwards of 4 months to approve the formation of a design professional corporation. And that's assuming everything was submitted in exact accordance with the state's rigorous standards. As a result, management must take a significantly longer term view with respect to licensing. Compliance becomes integral to the firm's ability to pursue out of state opportunities, as well as to maintain the right to practice on an ongoing basis. It is simply not possible to react and attempt to pursue licensure in response to an opportunity. Most times, that opportunity will have passed. Finally, much like managing firm licenses, firms need to invest in a way to manage qualifiers and track their continuing education certification. An ideal solution includes software to track qualifier information across states, giving management immediate visibility into who is licensed where, and producing an actionable list of tasks whenever a departure occurs or is imminent. Another challenge is when firms want to expand into other states and are required to register to do business in each state via foreign qualification. Today, many businesses are seeing the need to foreign qualify in one or more states. A highly relevant example that became more prevalent during the pandemic is needing to foreign qualify due to a remote work arrangement where an existing employee is not working from home outside the company's domicile or physical office. There are plenty of other reasons why a business would need to expand, whether it's planning to submit proposals, opening a branch office, or simply having regular commercial activity or a physical presence of some kind. If you do want to look up a specific transaction in any state, I encourage you to use the link on your screen to check out our foreign qualification guide. To foreign qualify in a new state, the business is faced with the prospect of ensuring its name is available for use, identifying a reliable registered agent in that state, and filling the appropriate forms with all appropriate state agencies, Secretary of State, Department of Revenue, and the licensing boards, all before beginning to transact business. These are variations to each state's requirements to register for foreign qualification. So it's important to research each state's requirements and understand the process and the order of operations between state agencies when registering the business in another state. Overall, most states require at least one individual, known as the qualifier or responsible party, to have their individual license first, and proof that the firm is in good standing in its current domicile. It must identify a reliable registered agent in that state and file the appropriate forms all before beginning to transact business. To submit the Certificate of Authority application, proof of good standing by the firm in their current domestic state is often required, and the COA approval is usually required for the licensing application to be reviewed and approved. Preparing the licensing application involves confirming availability and clearance of the legal name. For example, for ABC Engineering, it may require a letter from the licensing board showing that the word engineering can be used in the name. There are multiple agencies involved in the foreign qualification application, and the licensing processes, typically with the licensing agencies such as the Board of Engineering or Architecture, will provide more specific information for firms than the Secretary of State will, especially regarding ownership structure and naming requirements. Multiple calls to each agency to verify information may be required, and this can create some logistical difficulty between identifying the need to register and the time it takes the state to approve the application. If you're not careful, there can be penalties for late registration, as well as potential delays in starting business transactions in a new state. You can see why dedicated research and preparation are needed before entering any state. Failure to do so will result in rejected licenses and business entity registrations, costly amendment fees, and delays in the ability to start working in a new state. Now imagine going through this process across several states, and you can see how intricate multi-state registration can be. Businesses should examine their current and planned activities out of state and assess whether foreign qualification and additional registrations apply and work to secure them. So let's dive into the business naming and structure in more detail. When registering for foreign qualification, the business must ensure its name is available for use or a variation of it. You're probably familiar with certain professional entity types, which allow a given company to practice in a regulated profession. Examples of that include a professional corporation, professional association, or PLLC. Professional entities are registered and named at the state level, and the requirements also differ from state to state. Take, for example, a South Carolina engineering firm. In South Carolina, there is no PLLC entity type. Thus, the engineering firm is organized as a traditional LLC. However, if that firm wishes to operate and obtain licensure in North Carolina, a traditional LLC won't be approved by the Secretary of State or the licensing board because in North Carolina, they require that PLLC or must be included in the name. This leaves the firm with two entities across two states to maintain, operating under two names as well. In addition, many states have distinct entity name requirements for architecture and engineering firms. In most states, only companies that are authorized to practice architecture or engineering are able to use those and related terms in their legal names. For firms formed in states that don't require one of those words, they can expect to need an assumed name in that new foreign state that includes the term in order to comply. And the forced assumed name must be used in state on everything from tax accounts, firm licenses, and even contracts and invoices. For example, in Idaho and Alabama, the firm must have an engineer on staff and in good standing before they can use the word engineer in their name. And in a different twist on this requirement, we had a client who wasn't an engineering firm but wanted to use engineering in their name, and that was denied. Another naming challenge for the business may come into play during a rebranding initiative too. The same process of checking availability applies before the new name can be recorded and used. And if the business registers in multiple states, this is a state-by-state exercise. Then there are the ownership requirements. States want the principals of AEC firms operating in their states to be licensed, hence qualified to run the practice. This is basic consumer protection, but states have varying ownership thresholds. Take our South Carolina engineering firm example. If it wishes to foreign qualify into New York State, it must demonstrate that 100% of the company's membership or shares are owned by professionals licensed in New York. For many firms, that is just not possible. Either select individuals aren't specifically licensed in New York or they're not engineers at all because maybe their home state doesn't mandate that. The only other option then for our South Carolina firm is to consider an entity called the Design Professional Corporation. For that entity, New York State sets the bar at 75.01% of owners needing to be licensed, along with a host of other considerations. Firms may quickly discover they need several entities, each with different ownership structures, to comply in each state where they operate. How to name and structure the ownership of a new entity will take time and sometimes major consideration by management. And it is essential to understanding the process and getting the firm properly registered. While these requirements and hurdles have always existed, many AEC firms are facing broader exposure in the rush to bid on new projects from the recent infrastructure bill and rebounding construction markets. It is imperative to be ready to clear regulatory hurdles in each new state in order to win. As a result, management must take a significantly longer term view with respect to licensing. I also want to point out that firms should consult with their legal, tax, and accounting professionals. These parties are there to advise the business on their specific requirements, as well as on any tax or legal liability. Now, let's turn our attention to another aspect of compliance, tax registration. In the vast majority of states and for most tax accounts, action by the business is required in the form of a tax registration application. Whereas the business entity registration takes place with the Secretary of State and licensing is handled by licensing boards, tax registration is a distinctly separate process, and it takes place with the Department of Revenue. Businesses have the obligation of determining their tax liability and then registering to open tax accounts. Only in limited cases are tax accounts opened automatically, such as franchise tax in California or Texas. To the right, you'll see a list of a few common tax types a business may need to register for in a state. There may be multiple agencies that are involved in tax registrations, each with its own process, and application firms need to plan ahead for lengthy processing times. And once registered, these accounts are then required to file returns and pay taxes. We have a lot to cover in today's presentation, so we'll avoid a deep examination of any specific registration application. However, for those of you who aren't familiar with the tax registration process, just know that these applications require highly detailed information on the company, its ownership, and planned taxable activity. We have an example of this to share. Recently, my colleague spoke with a CFO of a fast-growing Maryland firm They had an employee starting in the state of New York in a month. She thought that was plenty of time, saying she turned her attention to registration during the week of the employee started. Now, recall what we just discussed. In New York, foreign registration with a Department of State can take several weeks on its own. To set up the domestic design professional corporation can take months. Coupled with the time it takes the Department of Taxation and Finance to process tax registration applications, you can conservatively add 3 weeks to another month on top of those timelines. That means the best time to get started without incurring any additional expedited fees would have been a minimum of 4 months before the employee's start date, if not longer. Any additional delay jeopardizes the firm's ability to onboard and pay that employee. Firms everywhere are running into the same issue, setting up in each state, from determining whether or not the entity has nexus and even needs to register, to the process of filing and securing the various registrations and accounts across agencies takes a bit of time. Without state without a state registration, it's not practical to wait until you have an employee ready to start, and it's not efficient to repeat this scramble in each new state. Management and especially HR and legal teams need to be in lockstep, reviewing the hiring pipeline and ensuring registrations are in order as soon as it becomes feasible. As a result, just like the process of registering the entity, it's important to examine your firm's unique tax requirements upfront, understand the order of operations, and work proactively to secure the necessary accounts. Remember, because state requirements and your firm's specific nexus change, it's important to repeat this on a regular basis, and we recommend doing so in collaboration with a CPA or other tax or accounting professionals. By doing all of this, the firm monitors where state requirements potentially apply and can be ready to register when it becomes necessary. This is a brief summary of best practices for researching, planning, and applying for expanding into new states and doing foreign qualification. And this holistic approach is needed, which involves, conducting a comprehensive research in the state before attempting to file anything, understanding the order of operations, consulting with legal, tax, and accounting professionals, having internal discussions and making decisions about entity name, structure, and ownership, which may need to take place first. Identifying qualifiers and responsible parties, being aware of logistical difficulties that could result in delays and thus penalties, and then finally managing the applications and filing fees across multiple agencies to their various deadlines. Now, we do have a poll question, which I'm going to put on your screen here in just a second. And that should come up now. The question is, does your firm need or plan to register in additional states within the next 6 months? Alrighty, pretty evenly split. We have about 63% of you saying you are planning to expand in the next 6 months. All right, some are saying no, and 50-50 right now. Perfect. I'll end that poll. Thank you for answering that. Next, let's discuss the need to maintain good standing in order to renew the firm's licenses. Now, in every state in which you operate, your firm will now have ongoing obligations to maintain good standing, including any new foreign jurisdictions. You may be familiar with them already from managing the entity in your home state, but every state requires businesses to maintain a registered agent to receive service of processes, lawsuits, and other government notices. The agent forwards the documents to the business, giving it and its counsel enough time to respond. It is often the first and only point of contact between government agencies, the courts, and the business or its legal counsel. So it's important to have an agent that can reliably receive these documents at their physical location and then forward them to you. Nearly every state requires businesses and entities to file an annual report to ensure it keeps current information on record. Because each state has a unique deadline, a multi-state business faces deadlines throughout the year. Reports can be due on a yearly or biennial basis. Many states also require the business to file and pay taxes to maintain corporate good standing, such as California, New York, and Texas. And there may be business lifecycle filings required as well, which vary by state. For example, registering a DBA, doing business as, and more. Overall, if the business misses even a single filing, it immediately faces consequences that start with late fees and increase all the way to administrative action and the denial of the right to do business in a state. Administrative action can generally be undone by a process called reinstatement, whereby the firm files articles of reinstatement and pays all back taxes, filing fees, and penalties. And obviously, this can be a costly and lengthy process, not to mention the reinstatement becomes part of the business's permanent record. Sometimes firms that have an entity that no longer operates in a state, they decide that they don't want to pay the fees to keep up with or keep up with those obligations associated with maintaining the entity, only to find an opportunity in that state a few months later. But now they've fallen out of good standing and they have to play catch up. They pay reinstatement fees that far exceed the original filing costs. A much more cost-effective option might have been to simply withdraw the entity and reform qualify later, or simply to maintain an agent and file the necessary annual report information with that entity all along. In general, both maintaining the entity and closing the entity properly are less expensive and less risky than just letting it lapse into noncompliance. Once licensed in a given jurisdiction, the firm will have license ID numbers, registration dates, and the renewal deadlines and continuously changing requirements to navigate. With over 1,500 AEC filings, keeping up with these changes to the requirements can be very time consuming. And as the firm grows and becomes licensed in multiple jurisdictions or specialties, that complexity just increases. Along with the license application itself, there is other documentation needed, like keeping up with continuing education, surety bonds, and insurance requirements and financial statements. Many of these were required with the initial licensing application, and they need to be maintained and reported to the licensing agencies going forward. Licensing renewals applications usually require proof of good standing by the Secretary of State as well. Renewing licenses on time can take more effort than you expect, as many agencies require maintenance filings anytime there is a change to a company name, ownership, contact information, or operating activity. And as I mentioned earlier, many licensing jurisdictions stipulate that the business maintains internal records and follows certain governance or ownership requirements. These may or may not need to be reported on a license renewal application, but most licensing agencies have the authority to enforce and penalize governance violations. Many firms expect their individual engineers to maintain their own continuing education and their license renewals. The firms lose a key level of oversight and faces increased risk by keeping these individual license management at arm's length. As we'll touch on later, even a single lapsed individual license from a qualifying engineer can have major consequences. So whether or not a firm has the administrative capability to directly handle individual license renewals, it should invest in a solution that at minimum gives management direct insight into the status of those practitioners in any state at any time. Relying on spreadsheets and other legacy systems with manual reminders runs the risk of a critical lapse, leading to direct financial penalties, but more importantly, a gap in the ability to operate and secure new business. You need to develop a system to manage all the aspects to maintaining and renewing multiple licenses. Here's a brief slide on monitoring states and local requirements. There are 800 plus AEC licenses, 1,500 plus AEC licensing filings, 2,000 plus US filing authorities, 20,000 unique filings. continuing education in 50 plus states. And some of the best practices to include here is to conduct a review each year, incorporate new requirements into your licensing and compliance management system, and then finally just allowing time to complete new applications and filings. And here is a summary of those best practices that we just went over. Securing new licenses, reviewing Secretary of State requirements alongside state licensing board requirements before beginning any filings, managing those qualifiers, setting up an automated system to track and report license statuses of all qualifying professionals, including continuing education certifications, expanding into new states, research administrative habits and preferences of state agencies in each new jurisdiction yearly in your planning and allow time for the application review process, maintaining renewals in good standing, keep your records up to date with the board and set up automated system of reminders of all license renewal dates. And then finally, monitoring changes to requirements. Now, firms that now operate in multiple states may need to repeat this process in every single state, wherever required. To address this, management should start thinking about ways to proactively manage complexity across these jurisdictions. The only effective way to do this is with a planned system that lays out clear roles and processes to handle research, registration, and ongoing reporting. To facilitate, management should also consider outsourcing non-core components of the process to specialized providers. Relying on spreadsheets and other legacy systems with manual reminders runs the risk of a critical lapse, leading to direct financial penalties, but more importantly, a gap in the ability to operate and secure new business. Firms need to consider their business compliance and professional licensing management as a system to reduce the risk of items slipping through the cracks and firms falling out of good standing. The system needs to provide full visibility and encompass all licensing stakeholders and their activities, including the individual's engineering licenses and tracking their CEUs, the operations and administrative leads who manage the system day to day, to human resources handling the hiring and onboarding and often also tracking continuing education, the legal counsel and financial administrators coordinating on certificates of authority and other compliance needs, and even the marketing and business development teams who need to know, are we registered to do business in that new state for any proposals under consideration? The best way or dream state to manage compliance starts with a proactive and comprehensive system for complying. It involves a top-down strategy as well as the right people, process, and technology to execute. To address this, management should start thinking about ways to proactively manage complexity across jurisdictions. The only effective way to do this is with a planned system that lays out clear roles and processes to handle research, registration, and ongoing reporting. To facilitate, management should also consider outsourcing those non-core components. On your screen are components of what a system might include, which we'll dive into here on the last segment of today's call. Establishing a system for business information and records, command the renewals of firms and individual licenses, and then define internal roles and processes. To be clear, every firm is unique. What we share here is general in nature and based on our extensive experience working with organizations of all sizes, but we encourage you to take these ideas back to your management teams and legal counsel in order to shape your overall compliance program. Harbor Compliance offers a one-stop solution to many of the challenges you've heard presented today. We've taken these strategies and defined what constitutes an ideal system and built a suite of services and software around it. We've built cloud-based compliance software and continuously maintain a database of nationwide requirements. It keeps everyone within your organization up to date on your registration status in each state, and it provides a secure, efficient, and effective way for your organization to maintain and access essential compliance information. Of course, organizations that register in multiple states and have multiple entities just gain additional value. Access to our software is available as part of our managed services or standalone as a SaaS. There are 4 purpose purpose-built modules: license manager, entity manager, tax manager, and records manager. So when we talk about needing a single place to manage registration data, records, and reporting deadlines, our software modules do just that. They provide your organization with valuable reporting insights needed to easily assess where your business is registered. We also provide the support services to manage the compliance system: registered agent, annual reports, management of your licenses, Secretary of State registrations, tax registrations, and managing DBAs and many other corporate lifecycle filings as needed. We offer managed services by AEC compliance experts at the level of support you desire, from onboarding support to fully managed services. A current client of Harbor Compliance is actually an ENR Top 50 engineering firm. This firm provides integrated land development engineering and environmental consulting services for private developers, property owners, energy companies, and public sector clients, and employs over 1,400 professionals and has 33 regional offices. Traditionally, the firm used Microsoft Excel, SAP, GIS mapping, and PowerPoint to manage the business registration and professional licensing requirements across the United States. As the firm grew, the sheer volume of work caused registration and licensing information to be overlooked, resulting in fire drills that needed the immediate attention of a group of people and exposing the firm to risk of falling out of good standing. In 2017, their internal risk management committee began searching for a better way to manage these important tasks. Rather than waiting to be prompted for a state registration renewal, they searched for a proactive management tool. At an AEC conference, which we're actually attending next week, this firm discovered Harbor Compliance purpose-built compliance solution, and after careful investigation, they partnered with us. In one single solution, the firm centrally locates and tracks business entity registrations, professional licenses, and renewals for every U.S. state. Their comprehensive solution includes Harbor Compliance's Entity Manager and License Manager software, registered agent, and annual report services, and they have a dedicated customer success manager who is an expert in the AEC industry to support all of their compliance needs. The licensing and business registration requirements for every state in which the firm operates are pulled into their dashboard with just a click. Renewal reminders for filings and annual reports are automated for them, ending the fire drills that took up so much valuable time. In addition, the firm can reference the continuing education requirements for each state, and as well as tracking their individual CE certificates in the software. And their new compliance program has resulted in saving time and money. They have a single point of contact that oversees the day-to-day in less time, saving 50% versus past methods of complying. They have peace of mind from the reduced risk of compliance gaps or missed renewals, and they have confidence to quickly pursue new proposals to win business. Business lifecycle requirements can change frequently, as I'm sure a lot of you know. And once registered, the organization needs to maintain specific registration numbers and dates, filing deadlines and copies of registration, determinations, and licenses. Our Entity Manager software is an ideal solution for managing these essentials to remain in good standing. Our proprietary requirements database gives you the current requirements across all U.S. agencies, saving you time from researching for them. You easily have information at your fingertips that you can use prior to registering or renewing, and even during strategic changes to the business's operations that trigger some type of change or maintenance filing. With our interactive map, which you see on the screen, you have immediate visibility of entity and compliance status in each state, including maintaining current registered agent information. Most multi-state organizations should consider hiring a nationwide registered agent service provider. In this way, they can rely on a single vendor for representation, resulting in consistency, reliability, and efficiency. Maintain good standing with automated reminders for annual reports and required filings. Not only is registration data visible and in one place, But any events and tasks required to maintain standing, such as an annual report and license renewals, can be calendared, assigned, and actioned with automated reminders sent to your team. Keep in mind, registered agent documents are time sensitive. So when your business receives a delivery, you don't want that to land on the wrong person's desk or inbox, both due to the nature of the document and the possible delay it causes. The system simplifies compliance management with all the data and records in one platform and ensures continuity through staff and vendor changes. Very similar, our license manager software saves you time and effort maintaining all your professional licensing in one platform. We provide up-to-date tracking of state and local requirements specifically for AEC firms in our Compliance Core database and License Manager. You can access the #1 nationwide licensing knowledge database in our Compliance Core that tracks current statutory requirements for firms' licenses and individual licenses across all state agencies. And your licenses are dynamically linked to our Compliance Core, so the data in your portfolio is always current and reflects the ever-changing requirements. All your licensing information is centrally managed in the License Manager. It offers immediate visibility and a US map into your firm's licenses across the nation, giving the appropriate employees and management the instant visibility they need to do their job. For example, can the COO identify who the firm's qualifiers are? Can the Director of Business Development tell, can we do business here? Surely having this information at hand facilitates their ability to close a deal faster. You can also filter the map. You can also filter in the map by business type or individual, which is especially helpful when needing to track responsible parties or qualifying individuals and your individual's professional licenses. It provides alerts for approaching licensing actions and deadlines, and it's easy to get what you need with those filtering capabilities. I have our last poll question of the day here, which I'll populate on your screen here. Let me go back. And that last poll question is, how is your firm currently managing professional licenses? Are you doing that using spreadsheets, maybe an internal system you created, a third-party provider, or an attorney? All right, as expected, a lot of you are using spreadsheets and other third-party providers. Perfect. Looks like most people answered. 70% of you said spreadsheets and 30% said a third-party provider. Thank you. And then on this next slide here with License Manager, you can easily sort to find information you need. For example, you can sort by your qualifying engineer or architect and see their status in all the states that they are listed, or sort for renewal dates and license renewal tasks that can be scheduled, assigned, and actioned. You can also see clearly upcoming due dates. And when you click on the Details tab of any license in the list, you can view the detailed state and local requirements of the license. You can track continuing education requirements and file your CE certificates. And lastly, centralized storage simplifies records management, including applications, filings, continuing education certificates, and the licenses. Many of you may be concerned about the complexity of managing licensing and business entity requirements and the ongoing drain on staff time. Compliance registrations and renewals are key areas that can be handled with trained internal staff or outsourced, for example, to a service provider. Harbor Compliance offers a white glove experience. We'll file on your behalf and maintain registrations and licenses for you. Remember, everyone plays a part, internally and externally, starting with management. The key is to be proactive and review all of your roles and processes regularly. We've talked through various complexities involved in managing business compliance in a modern era, and we've discussed the importance of a robust compliance program that encompasses internal processes and which ties into the organization's growth strategy. Use the information you've learned here and communicate it to your management team. Take some time to self-assess, especially if you've been employing or hiring, selling, or operating across state lines. Gaps may emerge that simply can't be met using existing processes and resources. As businesses evolves faster and faster, it's increasingly important to be aligned with a vendor who can support your ever-changing needs across the enterprise. In closing, Harbor Compliance offers software and managed licensing, business lifecycle, and tax registration services across the United States. We're also a nationwide provider of registered agent service with local offices in all 50 states, DC, and Puerto Rico. We offer support on a comprehensive as a basis as you require, whether your firm needs assistance managing licenses to book new business or to register or maintain entities, opening tax accounts, or apply for business licenses. Our dedicated account services team will support you. At this point, we like to thank you for joining us today and offer you a free Harbor Compliance score where we will verify your compliance status for your various business entities you have set up nationwide. If you are interested in getting a free Harbor Compliance score, please let us know in the chat box or send me an email or just simply reach out to us after this presentation. As I mentioned at the start of the presentation, today's session is eligible for continuing education credit through Earmark. You can use the QR code on your screen now to download the Earmark app. And after the session concludes, we'll email out a 5-question quiz. Once you complete that quiz, you'll receive your CPE certificate. That is the end of today's presentation. Once again, if you are attending the ACEC conference, I will be there next week. Feel free to come up and talk to me. But if you have any questions following this webinar, my email is on the screen, and I will get back to you as soon as I receive that email. Thank you for joining us today. Have a great rest of your day and have a great weekend.